As always, I want to thank you, all of those first-time viewers. Thank you for coming by my channel and giving me a chance to speak words, hopefully, that will impact your life greatly. And then for all of my returning viewers, again, I always got to thank my folks who rock out with me. Appreciate you. One more thing. If these videos are having an impact on your life, or if this one is having an impact on your life, I invite you to both like and share them. Like and share. All right, so listen, we've been in this fantastic series talking about the keys of restoration. You know, this whole series started, really for me, this started many years ago. So, and I put up a video in the first video where I prophesied about the coming conflict, season of conflict that we are now currently experiencing on levels that are unfathomable to me. And the country has been torn, and people have been torn, and all kinds of things have been torn because this is that season, y'all. It's been 4 years long. And I don't know when it's going to end because God has not given me an end date or not spoken to me about the end of it. But what he has done is spoken to me about restoration. So when I prophesied that word, he gave me a book called Undefiled Greatness to write. The book was to accompany this season of conflict so that as the season of conflict hit us, that we would know how to take that conflict and use that conflict for our advantage and not for our destruction. Because one of the things I've noted when I taught on this last year is, well, not last year, almost 4 years ago. One of the things I noted then is that whenever there's conflict, God uses the moment of conflict to reveal things about you. And if you're not careful to understand the goal of conflict will cause you to tear apart and separate and become destroyed. But the real goal in conflict, or at least for God, is to use it to show you things in you, or use it to show you things in a nation, or use it to show you things in a business, areas of lack. Sometimes it shows areas of strength, but oftentimes we see our areas of lack. And then the goal is for you to confront that lack so that God can heal the situation. Because when we get deeper in this, I'll show you that one of the big issues with not tackling things that are in your life is that if they're in your life causing problems in one area, they're generally in your life causing problems in other areas. And if you could get a handle on the problem, it would clear up a lot of the situations that you have in your life. So that's what we've been talking about. And so I'm teaching out of the book that came out of this called Undefiled Greatness. And again, I invite you to go get it. You know, one of the things I have noted is that when I talk about voice of God, or write about the voice of God, or dreams or visions, and all of those various ways that God communicates with us, the fantastic ways that he communicates with us, you know, I have no problem with people viewing that information or liking, sharing, buying, purchasing, whatever. But when we talk about conflict, it's just one of those things that we don't want to talk about as a society. And one of the reasons that people are in so much conflict, and one of the reasons they're so disheartened, and one of the reasons they're so discouraged, and one of the reasons they're so offended and angry, is because they have conflict in their life, and they don't recognize that God doesn't only speak through dreams and visions, but God also uses conflict as a way to communicate with us. And we don't like that because there are people who teach us that everything is supposed to be happy. Everything is supposed to be good. Everything is supposed to be pleasant. God wants us happy, happy, happy. But the truth is, the Bible talks to us about the fact that God will discipline us, right? And it says as an act of love, he does so. And it says this, it says, no discipline is pleasant, but grievous nonetheless, right? And so God does use conflict. And we have to talk about conflict, and we have to know how to manage conflict. Otherwise, what's meant to heal us or help us will actually destroy us. And before I move on into the subject, I want to note one more thing. I want you to note that when you look at the story of Jonah, because I know some people don't believe that God uses conflict. But when God had an issue with Jonah, because Jonah decided not to preach to the city of Nineveh, he got on the boat. The very first thing that happens when he gets on the boat is the Bible tells us that a great storm arose on the sea. And guess what? Jonah knew what God was saying. What was God saying to Jonah? God was saying the same thing to Jonah with the wind that he arose on the sea. It was the same thing he told Jonah when he gave him the dream to go preach to Nineveh. Jonah understood that, reacted to that, got thrown into the sea. And then it says, and God prepared a great fish. That is a moment of unpleasant conflict. But Jonah again repented because he also knew again what God was saying through conflict. So I want y'all to get just as excited about learning about how to deal with conflict and the voice of God in conflict as you are about dreams and visions. Because dreams and visions will present you with conflict. I talk about that in the book as well, but I want you to get used to the ordinary, everyday normalcy that we see called conflict and learn how to interpret it. Learn how to interpret it. So we've been talking about this, and we've been talking about the fact that conflict can cause tears. And then, on this end of it, we're talking about the restoration. Because 4 years ago, I talked about the conflict. Now that we're in civil unrest and all kind of problems within at least America and seemingly other parts of the world with coronavirus and all these their various things, then we have to talk about how do we be restored? How do we bring people back together? How do we bring relationships back together? How do we bring businesses back together? How do we bring co-workers back? How do we bring things back together? So in the first video, we talked about, Naaman's story, and that's what we've been doing is looking at Naaman's story. We looked at the fact that Naaman has a problem in his life called leprosy, and that he finds out that he has an opportunity to get rid of the leprosy, and he takes advantage of that opportunity, and he takes that opportunity and finds himself in a position where he's standing before the prophet Elijah, and then he follows Elijah's instructions, and the Bible says that he gets healed. He gets healed. And so we've been looking at that because we want to know what is it in his life that helped him to get the healing. The Bible actually uses the word his flesh was restored. So how do we get restored? How do we get the broken areas of our life to come together? How do we get them to mend? How do we get them to come together in a meaningful way? That's something that we want to talk about, right? So in the midst of that, let's look at his life. We said this. We said the first thing he had to do was he had to deal with the but in his story. He could not see the but as an even though. He had to see it as a but. Because again, when it says he was a leper, he was successful in all these various ways, but a leper. What it's doing is casting what we call in America a shade. It's casting doubt on his or a blemish or a mark on his accomplishments. So even though he was great, he had something that didn't appeal to everybody. But he had enough maturity, I'll say, to recognize that even though he was successful, this is still something that he needed to deal with. And I think a lot of the times we have problems because we say, even though I've been successful, even though, and we need to say I've been successful, but so that we can have the motivation to deal with the problem. Then we said the second but in his story was he got to the final moment where he could be healed. He got some instructions that he didn't like. And then it says, but he turned and walked away. And the thing was, what makes a person travel all of that distance, right? What makes them travel all of that distance and then walk away from a moment to be healed? What makes them go through all of the ups and downs and the journey? And we said that's actually the most dangerous but, because that's the but that makes you irrational. That's the but that keeps you from actually doing the things that God has actually given you the opportunity to do, because you've allowed some other but. And we said that but at the root of it is a heart voice. What you're saying to yourself, what you're saying about yourself, what you're saying about the situation. Those voices that come up on the inside tell us a lot about us. And the Bible says, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. We always stop at that verse and we stop right there and we say, hey, you better be careful. You're going to become a victim of your thinking. But if you read the rest of the verse, it says, it gives a scenario that pretty much says, this is the person says, eat and drink, but his heart is not with you. And so what the verse is trying to communicate to us is, if you really want to know who people are, you got to find out what they think. Only the person. And so whenever you have thoughts that come up within you, you need to monitor them. What are they saying to you? What are they challenging you? Are they good thoughts? Are they bad thoughts? Sometimes they reveal that we're stronger than we think we are. Sometimes they reveal that we're adulterous. Sometimes they reveal that we're murderous. Sometimes they reveal that we're angry. What are they revealing to you? Because that voice is more than likely the voice that's going to stop you from being everything that you're supposed to be. And so we talked about that. So we said the first key to restoration was acceptance, and all of that fell under the key of acceptance. Now, the second key that we need to talk about is perspective. I think this is where we get into a lot of trouble. Perspective. Perspective means how you view something. Is the glass half full or is the glass half empty? Believe it or not, there are people with a disposition, natural disposition, to see things as half empty. They are frustrated. And then there are people who are geared towards seeing things half full. And again, that can be frustrating because everything is not great and everything is not bad. And so somehow we have to find a way to pay attention to what we see and give either and evaluate it, is what I need to say. We need to evaluate it. And so I want us to look at the situation in Naaman's life, because part of the thing that almost kept him from being healed, that almost kept him from being restored, and part of what's probably keeping you from being restored and keeping the tears in your life from coming back together and healing, is probably your perspective, right? So let's look at 2 Kings again and read verse 10. It says this, because I want to show you the instructions, and then I want to show you how he viewed the instructions. So watch this. It says, and Elijah sent a messenger to him, saying, go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored to you, and you shall be clean. Those are the instructions. That's one point of view, right? That was the instructions. Now, let's look at how he viewed the instructions. He said, are not the Abner and the Parfar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean? So he turned and went away in a rage. Look at that. So on one hand, he has instructions to go and do something. Now, this is a different, this is a perspective, because the prophet has told him that this is what's going to work in your life. This will help you. This will take you over the top. This will satisfy what you've been waiting for. But then he says, are not the rivers of the Abner and the Parfar better? What he's really saying is he sees the situation differently. And this is part of the problem in why people in marriages, in their relationships, in their friendships, in their country, this is why we can't be healed. It's because everybody has a perspective of the situation. The question is it God's perspective? Is it a good perspective? Is it a rational perspective? Because I want you to think about this. He's really saying, isn't that water over there better than this water? Now, if God is going to heal you in the water, does it matter what kind of water God uses? If God is going to do something great in your marriage, does it really matter if you agree or don't agree with his tools or his methods? If this country is going to be healed from its racial divide, does it really matter, right? The perspective that God offers. Does it really matter? Are we viewing it correctly? If we're going to get healed of COVID, right? Does it matter? Right? Because right now we have these perspectives on these two racial issues, and we have them on the side of the COVID issue. You know, some people believe in wearing a mask. Some people don't believe in wearing a mask. Right? So we have different perspectives. And this is what's keeping us from experiencing healing. This is what's keeping our country from experiencing healing. Is there racism? Is there not racism? Based on your perspective. And this is the thing, your perspective is going to govern your decision. It's going to govern your behavior. It's going to govern whether you move toward doing what needs to be done to fix the situation or whether you do nothing. It's a matter of perspective. And some of you will never experience what God wants you to experience because you want to see things the way you want to see them. And you have to stop, and I encourage people, stop and consider. Now watch this. There is a third perspective in the story. It's really not a third perspective, but there's somebody that helps Naaman get to the right perspective. Watch this. In verse 13 it says, and his servants came near and spoke to him and said, my father, if the prophet had told you to do something great, would you not have done it? How much more then when he says to you, wash and be clean? In other words, they were saying, are you really going to go home because you don't like the water? Are you really going to let something so minuscule, something so small, something so meager deteriorate, cause you to lose out on the opportunity that God has freely given to you? Freely given to you. And I need you to think about that, people. Again, one of the things that made the second but is the most dangerous but, because he was able to talk himself out of his own miracle, out of his own blessing. And had it not been for these servants who offered him a different perspective, he would have gone home with his leprosy. And what did I say initially? That leprosy was threatening Naaman's family, right? It caused problems in his house. It caused problems with his nation. It was a problem for international entities. And then it finally became God's problem. So it has a range. It's creating the problem and that's why I try to warn. I'm trying to help y'all understand why you need to deal with that. But because if it is a problem in one place, it is a problem everywhere, right? I have a tendency to be slothful. There, I take my time, or I get unfocused on things that I need to do. That is not true in one area of my life. That is true in different areas of my life. And it throws everything off. And guess what, y'all? The one thing I said is that if you don't deal with your challenges, they threaten your future. They threaten your future. What ultimately was at risk was Naaman's future. How are you going to be a soldier if this condition continues to progress in your life until it overwhelms you to such a degree where you lose parts of your body? How can you continue to be a warrior? How can you continue your great reputation? And so that's why this is urgent, y'all, that you Have the right perspective. Have the right outlook on the problem. Was leprosy a curse, a gift, or a curse? Again, he was still successful. Is the water over there really better or worse? How do you know that, Naaman? What makes that water better? Because it has less mud? God said the muddy waters was where the healing was. So what makes you think? Was it better or was it worse? Y'all seeing the perspective issues he's having in this passage? Is the prophet against you or for you? He was quite insulted. So now you're saying that the man of God is giving you instructions, that your mama is giving you instructions, that somebody in your life is giving you instructions, that the leadership is giving you instructions, and somehow they are not in your favor. Perspective problems. Boy, does this have a bearing on America right now. Ooh, this is a problem. This is a big problem in America. You know, one of the reasons, and I know some of you won't like this, but I'm going to say it. One of the reasons we have such a horrible outbreak is because we have Democrats and Republicans playing a game of chess, and you have this president whom nobody likes caught in the middle, and because there has been so much game playing, so much problems, even though he is very problematic, when this virus struck, because of all of the political games that have been happening, could not even figure out if it was genuine or a ploy. And so we had this stupid theory going on that it's going to go away and that it's not really real. And during those moments, we lost precious time. And we lost precious time because of people's varying perspectives. Oh, this is very important. Is leadership against you or for you? That's what he was dealing with. This man of God, is it out for me? Does he? He just told you how to get healed. Does the CDC have it out for you by telling you to wear a mask? They just want you to be safe. What is your perspective? That's why we can't get past problems. Our perspective is jacked up. Is this a good or bad moment? He thought it was a bad moment. He thought that his healing moment was a bad moment. Perspective. How are you viewing the situation? How are you viewing the situation? Thank God for his servants who was able to give him a little bit of common sense during that season. And I'll get to the role of these kind of people in a later part. But for now, I want us to just think about this. I want us to think about how important it is to have the right perspective. What do you see? How are you seeing the problem? How do you see the situation? Are you overreacting? Because in the bottom line was, Naaman overreacted. And is that overreaction the result of that other butt? You know, the one I told you about, the most dangerous butt. The one that is irrational and talks you out of your future. I want to let that sit right there because I want y'all to understand that there is so much on the line right now. There is so much on the line right now. You may not see it, but one of the things about listening to God, and he's telling me to talk about this part of the book, restoration. He hadn't necessarily said, so I don't say he said anything unless he said anything, because you see what happens when people do. Then the prophecies fall on the ground because they feel like they just had to say something. I won't say the season has changed until he tells me the season has changed. But I will say this, he's definitely told me to teach this subject, to teach on this. And he told me these 2 chapters of the book, I want you to teach these 2 chapters. So I'm talking about restoration. Now, one thing I'll say, normally when I teach on something, whatever I'm talking about, he told me to do, the word, it won't take long for the manifestation to follow. That's usually. So it's important, y'all. It's important that we understand what's on the line. The future of a nation, the future of a business. And again, y'all, the other thing about perspective that I want you to note, and I think this is important for all of my business owners and a lot of people, is it's important to have vision in this moment. And maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself on this, because this is a great time. This is a great moment. If you have the right perspective of this problem, is this a moment of tragedy or is this a moment of opportunity? How do you see this moment? How do you see this moment? It's important that you see it with the right perspective. Because if not, you're going to miss everything that God has ordained for you to have, because you can't see correctly.